The Four Suns Empire. Chapter 1. The holographic display in Emperor Aldrich's throne room cast 4 brilliant points of light against the obsidian walls, each representing a solar system under his dominion. At the center blazed the golden sun, seat of imperial power, where massive orbital platforms and gleaming capital ships formed protective rings around the throne world of Aurelius Prime. The 3 outer systems pulsed with their own distinct colors, the Iron Sun's red glow marking Duke Voss's military strongholds, the Silver Sun's pristine white light illuminating Duchess Lyra's sprawling trade networks, and the Crimson Sun's deep amber radiance warming Duke Kane's fertile agricultural worlds. 4 suns, 4 pillars, Aldrich murmured to himself, a ritual phrase his father had taught him decades ago. The Empire's strength lay not in the iron grip of tyranny, but in the delicate balance of shared power. Each duke commanded absolute loyalty within their domain, yet remained bound to the throne through something far more complex than mere vassalage. Behind the emperor's throne hung 4 portraits, his wives, each a living symbol of the political web that held the empire together. Lady Mira, chosen by his parents from the ancient noble houses of the Golden Sun, gazed down with calculating dignity. Beside her, Lady Katara's steel-gray eyes reflected her origin as Duke Voss's selection, a former admiral whose allegiance remained as much with the Iron Sun as with the throne. Lady Zara's portrait captured the merchant's smile that had made her Duchess Lyra's perfect representative, though Aldrich knew that smile masked shrewd ambitions. Finally, Lady Elena's serene expression belied the quiet ruthlessness that had made Duke Kane's agricultural reforms so effective and so politically advantageous. The emperor harbored no illusions about his marriages. They were political alliances first, practical arrangements second, and personal relationships a distant third. Each wife commanded her own court, maintained her own network of spies and allies, and pursued her own agenda for the empire's future. The fact that they maintained civility in public was a testament to their political acumen, not their affection for him or each other. A soft chime announced an incoming priority transmission from the Outer Rim patrol fleet. Aldrich straightened in his throne, knowing that such calls rarely brought good news. As the hologram resolved into the image of Admiral Koreth, the man's grim expression confirmed the Emperor's suspicions. "Your Imperial Majesty," the Admiral began, his voice tight with barely controlled urgency, "we have a situation developing in the Veil Nebula. Long-range sensors have detected an unknown fleet configuration moving toward our border systems." Aldrich felt the familiar weight of command settle on his shoulders. Peace, he had learned, was not a destination, but a constant journey one that required eternal vigilance and the delicate balance of 4 suns to maintain. "Admiral, relay all sensor data to Imperial Intelligence and alert the Dukes. I want a full threat assessment within the hour." He paused, considering the implications. "And summon my sons. If we're facing an external threat, they need to be informed." The transmission ended, leaving the Emperor alone with the 4 points of light that represented his life's work. Through the throne room's vast transparasteel windows, he could see the golden orb of Aurelius Prime's sun beginning its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the imperial gardens where his youngest children played under the watchful eyes of their tutors. 27 years of marriage had given him 12 children. But it was his 3 eldest sons who would determine the empire's future. Crown Prince Marcus, 25 and already commanding respect and fear throughout the military. The young man possessed his grandfather's ruthless efficiency, perhaps too much of it. Second Prince Darian, 23, whose tactical brilliance had earned him the nickname the Ghost of Kithara, after his stunning victory in the border skirmishes 5 years prior. And then there was Elias, 21, whose gentle nature and idealistic reforms had made him popular among the common citizens, but skeptical among the nobility. "Your Majesty," Lady Mira's voice came from the throne room's entrance, cool and measured. His first wife moved with the practiced grace of someone who had spent decades maneuvering through imperial court politics. Behind her, maintaining precisely calculated distances, stood the other three empresses. Lady Katara's hand rested casually on the ceremonial blade at her hip, a reminder of where her true loyalties lay. Lady Zara's jewelry, each piece worth a fortune, sent subtle signals about the Silver Sun's current economic leverage. Lady Elena wore the simple but elegant robes that proclaimed her connection to the Empire's agricultural backbone, though Aldrich knew she commanded resources that could starve entire star systems. "We received word about the fleet alert," Lady Mira continued, her tone neutral. "Each duchy will, of course, respond according to their capabilities and interests." The words hung in the air like a diplomatic blade. Even in crisis, the competition continued. Each wife would be calculating how this external threat might shift the balance of power, how their duchy's response could gain advantage over the others, and how their own children might benefit from whatever came next. "Four perspectives," Aldrich said carefully, "from four competent leaders who understand what's at stake." The compliment was measured, acknowledging their abilities without suggesting favoritism. He could see each wife filing away his words, analyzing them for hidden meaning or advantage. They had all lived through the last major external threat 15 years ago, and each had emerged from that conflict with strengthened positions and deeper understanding of how to manipulate imperial politics. The Empire's strength lay in this tension as much as in its unity for ambitious women keeping each other in check, their competition driving innovation and efficiency, their mutual distrust preventing any single faction from dominating. It was exhausting to manage, but it worked. Chapter 2. The Princes and the Tragedy. The Imperial War Room hummed with activity, as holographic displays updated with incoming data from the border systems. Crown Prince Marcus stood at the central tactical table, his imposing frame casting shadows over the illuminated star charts. At 25, he possessed the bearing of a seasoned commander and the cold calculation of someone born to rule through fear. "The unknown fleet maintains formation just outside the Veil Nebula," he announced to the assembled military advisors, his voice carrying the authority that had made hardened generals defer to him despite his youth. 17 capital ships, unknown configuration. "They're testing our response time." Prince Darien lounged against the far wall, studying the data with the detached interest of a master strategist who had no intention of claiming responsibility for the outcome. His uniform bore the insignia of a fleet commander, but everyone knew he served by choice rather than obligation. The Ghost of Kithara had earned his reputation through unconventional tactics and an almost supernatural ability to predict enemy movements, skills that made him invaluable as an advisor and dangerous as a potential rival. "They're not testing our response time, brother," Darien said casually, straightening to approach the display. "They're testing our unity. Notice the positioning. They can strike at any of 3 systems simultaneously, forcing us to choose which duchy gets priority protection." Prince Elias entered the war room quietly, carrying himself with the understated dignity that made him popular among civilian populations, but often overlooked by military commanders. At 21, he lacked his brother's commanding presence, but his thoughtful questions and genuine concern for casualty reports had earned him a different kind of respect. "Have we attempted communication?" Elias asked, taking his place beside his brothers despite the subtle shift in posture that suggested the military staff considered his presence optional. Marcus's jaw tightened. "The first response to unknown hostiles is defensive positioning, not diplomacy, Elias. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable reviewing civilian evacuation procedures." The dismissal stung, and Darian caught the flash of hurt in Elias's eyes before his younger brother composed himself. It was a familiar dynamic, Marcus, using his position as heir to diminish his brothers, Darian deflecting with wit and distance, and Elias absorbing the casual cruelty while maintaining his principles. Actually, Darian interjected, Elias raises a valid point. If this is a probe of our political unity, then opening diplomatic channels might reveal more about their intentions than fleet movements. He paused, letting his tactical insight sink in. Besides, 3 empresses are currently calculating how this crisis affects their sons' positions in the succession. Diplomatic intelligence could be useful. Emperor Aldrich entered the war room as his sons fell silent, their conversation shifting instantly from sibling dynamics to formal military briefing. He surveyed the tactical display, noting not just the enemy positions but the way his sons had arranged themselves, Marcus at the center claiming command, Darian at the periphery maintaining independence, and Elias positioned where his input could be easily ignored. "Report!" Aldrich commanded. Marcus stepped forward with crisp military bearing. "Unknown fleet holding position at the Veil Nebula's edge, Your Majesty. I've ordered the 3rd Fleet to defensive positions and alerted all duchy commanders to prepare their forces. The enemy formation suggests they are familiar with our political structure," Darian added, his tone carefully neutral. "This could be reconnaissance for a larger force, or a test of our internal cohesion. Have we considered that they might be refugees or traders with damaged communication systems?" Elias suggested quietly. The silence that followed his words was telling. Marcus's expression hardened. Several military advisors exchanged glances, and even Darian's usual smirk faded. In the imperial court's unforgiving calculus, showing mercy or assuming good intentions was often viewed as weakness. "Son," Aldrich said carefully, "in matters of imperial security, we prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. But hope doesn't deploy shield generators or position weapons platforms." The rebuke was gentle but clear, and Elias nodded acceptance while Marcus's satisfaction was poorly concealed. Yet Aldrich caught Darian's thoughtful expression. His second son was calculating something, weighing variables in that brilliant tactical mind. 3 hours later, the crisis that would reshape the Empire's future began not with enemy fire, but with a routine inspection tour. Crown Prince Marcus had insisted on personally reviewing the orbital defense platforms around Aurelius Prime, claiming that the unknown fleet's presence demanded visible leadership from the heir apparent. His shuttle, accompanied by 2 escort fighters, departed from the Imperial Palace's landing platform under full security protocols. The explosion, when it came, lit up the sky like a second sun. Emergency frequencies crackled with confused reports. "Primary engines offline. Hull breach in Section 7. Life support failing." The escort fighters rushed to assist, but the Crown Prince's shuttle was already tumbling toward the planet's atmosphere, its emergency systems silent. In the palace war room, 3 men watched their futures change forever. Emperor Aldrich gripped the edge of the tactical table as rescue ships raced toward the falling debris. Prince Darian stared at the display with the expression of someone whose careful calculations had just been shattered by chaos. And Prince Elias, gentle Elias, who had suggested diplomacy over destruction, stood frozen as he realized that his brother's death might have just made him the most important person in the Empire. The Crown Prince of the Four Sons Empire died on impact, along with the certainty of an orderly succession. Chapter 3. The Kingmaker's Choice. The Imperial Palace had transformed overnight into a labyrinth of whispered conversations and calculated glances. In the 48 hours since Marcus's death, every corridor buzzed with speculation. Every gathering held the potential for alliance or betrayal. The Emperor had declared 7 days of mourning, but grief was a luxury the Empire's power brokers could not afford. Prince Darian stood on the observation deck of the palace's highest spire, watching the funeral preparations in the courtyard below. Workers assembled massive viewing stands where representatives from all four systems would gather to witness the Crown Prince's final journey. The ceremony would be magnificent, he knew, but the real drama was unfolding in private chambers and secured communication channels across the Empire. "The Duchess of Silver Sun has requested a private audience," announced Captain Reese, Darian's personal aide and one of the few people he trusted completely. The former intelligence officer had served with Darian during the Kithara campaign and understood the prince's preference for information over formality. "Let me guess," Darian said without turning from the window. "She wants to discuss the succession, and she's brought financial projections showing how her duchy's support could prove decisive." "Actually, sir, she brought her daughter." That got Darian's attention. Lady Zara's eldest daughter, Arya, was 18 and possessed her mother's keen intelligence, along with a reputation for ruthless ambition that impressed even seasoned court observers. If the Silver Sun was positioning Arya as a potential bride for the next heir, it meant they were making long-term calculations about the succession. "Interesting. And Duke Voss?" "His son arrived this morning with a full military escort. Prince Commander Victor's been meeting with senior fleet officers all day." Darian nodded thoughtfully. Victor was Marcus's closest friend and shared his brutal approach to governance. If the Iron Sun was rallying military support behind Victor's potential claim to the throne, it could mean civil war. The prince had royal blood through his mother, one of the emperor's sisters, making his claim legally viable if politically dangerous. And Duke Kane, silent so far, but his agricultural transport ships have been requesting unusual navigation clearances. Could be coincidence? Could be positioning supplies for a siege. "No such thing as coincidence in imperial politics," Darian murmured. He turned from the window to face his aide. "What about my other brothers and sisters?" Captain Reese consulted his tablet. "Prince Alexei is rallying support among the younger noble houses, apparently promising them greater representation in exchange for backing his claim. Princess Lyanna has been conspicuously absent from all court functions, which suggests she's either planning something significant or has been ordered to stay out of the way. And Prince Elias, yes, he's been visiting the families of the shuttle crew who died with Prince Marcus, personally offering condolences, arranging for their financial support, attending memorial services in the lower city." Darian felt something shift in his calculations. While the Empire's power brokers maneuvered for advantage, Elias was honoring the dead and comforting the grieving. It was exactly the kind of gesture that would be dismissed by the court as political naivety. But Darian recognized it as something far more valuable: genuine leadership. "Reese, I need you to arrange discreet meetings. Nothing that looks like faction building, just informal conversations with key figures." "What kind of key figures, sir?" "The ones everyone else is ignoring. Mid-level military officers who care more about stability than advancement. Planetary governors who worry about their citizens rather than their profit margins. Trade guild representatives who need reliable shipping lanes more than they need tax breaks." Darian paused, his tactical mind working through possibilities. "And I want intelligence reports on every potential claimant's supporters. Not their public positions, their real motivations." Over the next 3 days, Darian conducted what he privately called his research phase. He met with Admiral Santos, who had served loyally for 30 years, and worried that a succession crisis would shatter the fleet's unity. He spoke with Governor Chen of the manufacturing worlds, who feared that political instability would devastate the delicate supply chains that fed the Empire's industrial base. He even arranged a casual encounter with Master Artificer Kolos, whose shipyards built the vessels that kept the four systems connected. Each conversation revealed the same underlying truth. The Empire's strength lay not in the ambitions of its elite, but in the daily work of countless individuals who needed predictable leadership and stable institutions. Marcus had been feared, but fear was a tool that required constant maintenance. What the empire needed was someone who could inspire loyalty through competence and genuine concern for the common good. The revelation came during an unexpected encounter in the palace gardens. Darian had been walking the memorial paths, where holographic displays honored the empire's war dead, when he found Elias sitting beside the newest edition, a simple stone bearing the names of Marcus's shuttle crew. "I keep thinking about their families," Elias said quietly, not looking up as his brother approached. "Crew Chief Martinez has 3 children. Lieutenant Park was engaged to be married next month. They died because they were doing their duty. But who remembers them?" "You do," Darian replied, taking a seat on the adjacent bench. "That's not enough. Marcus was the crown prince, so his death reshapes the empire. But these people were just as important to someone, just as irreplaceable." Elias finally looked at his brother, and Darian saw something in his eyes that he hadn't expected. Not grief, but determination. "If I were emperor, that would change. Every life would matter, not just the ones with titles." "If you were emperor," Darian repeated slowly, "I know what you're thinking. I'm not strong enough, not ruthless enough, not brilliant enough. The court sees me as weak because I prefer negotiation to domination, because I believe in reform rather than control." Elias stood, brushing dust from his simple robes. "Maybe they're right. Maybe the empire needs someone more like Marcus, or more like you." "No," Darian said firmly, rising to face his brother. "The empire needs someone exactly like you." For the first time since Marcus's death, Elias looked genuinely surprised. "Darian, you can't be serious. You're the ghost of Kithara, the master tactician. If you wanted the throne—" "I don't want it. I've never wanted it." Darian clasped his brother's shoulder. "But I want to be free to explore the outer rim, to captain my own ship, to make my own choices. And I can only have that freedom if the empire is stable enough to survive without constant military intervention." Understanding dawned in Elias's expression. "You think I could provide that stability?" "I think you're the only one who can. Victor would rule through fear, like Marcus, but without Marcus's competence. Alexei would favor the young nobles and create resentment among the established houses. Liana is brilliant, but has too many enemies among the military leadership." Darian's voice took on the certainty of someone who had analyzed every variable. "But you inspire people to be better than they are. That's not weakness, Elias. That's the rarest form of strength. Even if you're right, how could I possibly win against candidates with military backing, economic resources, and political networks?" Darian smiled with the cold calculation that had made him legendary among the empire's enemies. "Leave that to me. I may not want to be emperor, but I am very good at making kings." The ghost of Kithara had chosen his candidate, and Prince Elias Gentle, idealistic, supposedly weak Prince Elias, suddenly found himself with the empire's most dangerous ally. Chapter 4. The Final Campaign. The unknown fleet's advance had slowed to a crawl 3 days after Marcus's death, but they showed no signs of retreating. Intelligence reports painted an ominous picture. The 17 capital ships had been joined by supply vessels and long-range reconnaissance craft. This was no mere probe. It was the prelude to invasion. "They're waiting," Admiral Korath reported during the Emergency War Council. "Our analysis suggests they're gauging our response to the succession crisis. If we appear divided, they'll strike at our weakest points." Emperor Aldrich's weathered face reflected the weight of command. With Marcus dead and the succession uncertain, the Empire projected exactly the kind of weakness that invited predators. Military assessment? Victor's Iron Sun forces are mobilizing, but they're positioning primarily to protect their own systems, Admiral Santos reported grimly. The Silver Sun's merchant fleet has converted to defensive configurations, and the Crimson Sun is fortifying agricultural worlds. We're acting like 4 separate domains, instead of one empire. Prince Darien had been silent during the briefing, studying tactical displays with the intensity that had made him legendary. When he finally spoke, every head in the room turned toward him. "I'll take command of the unified fleet," he said quietly. "One last campaign." The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Darien had consistently refused major military appointments since Kythera, preferring advisory roles that allowed him freedom of movement. His sudden willingness to accept supreme command caught everyone off guard. "Darien," Emperor Aldrich said carefully, "this would be the largest fleet action in 15 years. Are you certain? The enemy is counting on our disunity. They expect us to defend 4 separate territories with 4 separate strategies." Darien's eyes held the cold calculation that had earned him his reputation. "Instead, we'll give them one opponent they didn't plan for, the entire might of the Four Suns Empire under unified command." What Darien didn't reveal was his true motivation. He had spent days analyzing not just the military situation, but the political ramifications. The Empire's most powerful factions, military officers, trade guilds, planetary governors, industrial leaders, all faced devastating losses if the invasion succeeded. A victory under his leadership would create an unprecedented debt of gratitude, one that could be leveraged for the succession. Admiral Santos leaned forward. "What's your operational concept?" Darien gestured to the tactical display, highlighting key positions. "The enemy expects us to defend our industrial centers, agricultural worlds, and population hubs. Instead, we'll abandon the outer defensive perimeter and draw them into the Kythera Passage, the same asteroid field where I earned my reputation." "That's a massive risk," Duke Voss's military representative objected. "You're talking about allowing enemy forces deep into our territory. I'm talking about choosing the battlefield instead of letting them choose it for us." Darien's smile was sharp as a blade. "The Kythera Passage offers natural concealment for our smaller ships while forcing their capital vessels into predictable corridors. More importantly, it's where I do my best work." The campaign that followed would be remembered as the Ghost of Kythera's masterpiece. Darien assembled a fleet of over 300 vessels, every ship the Empire could spare, and led them in a tactical withdrawal that drew the enemy deep into Imperial space. The invaders, sensing victory, pursued aggressively. The battle began when the enemy fleet entered the Kythera Passage, expecting to catch the Imperial forces in retreat. Instead, they found themselves surrounded. Darien had positioned smaller craft throughout the asteroid field, hidden among the rocky debris. When the enemy capital ships became strung out in the narrow passages, the trap closed. For 8 hours, the Ghost of Kythera orchestrated a symphony of destruction. Enemy ships found themselves caught in crossfires from multiple directions, while asteroid bombardments disabled their navigation systems. The Imperial fleet struck like a swarm of predators, each attack coordinated with devastating precision. When the enemy flagship finally signaled surrender, Darien's victory was absolute. Of the 17 capital ships that had threatened the Empire, 3 were destroyed, 9 were captured intact, and the remaining 5 limped away with crippled engines and minimal crews. The celebration across the Four Suns Empire was instantaneous and overwhelming. Prince Darien had saved the realm in its darkest hour, displaying the kind of military genius that legends were built upon. More importantly, he had done it with vessels and crews drawn from every duchy, proving that unity bred strength. But Darien's mind was already focused on the political victory he had truly been seeking. The day after the battle, Master Artificer Kolos visited the prince's flagship. The gruff shipbuilder, whose yards had built much of the victorious fleet, spoke with the blunt honesty of someone who owed his livelihood to imperial stability. "Prince Darien, my yards will be repairing and rebuilding for years because of this victory. If there's ever anything you need, anything at all, You have only to ask. Similar conversations followed with Admiral Santos, whose naval career had been saved by the unified command structure, with Governor Chen, whose industrial worlds had been spared invasion, with the leaders of trading guilds whose shipping lanes remained secure. Each offered what amounted to a blank check of political support. 1 week after his victory, Darien began calling in those debts. "I don't want medals or titles," he told each creditor privately. "I want your support for my brother Elias in the succession. Not just your personal backing. I want you to convince others that stability requires the right choice." The response was overwhelmingly positive. Admiral Santos spoke to senior naval officers about the importance of continuity over chaos. Master Artificer Kolos persuaded his fellow industrialists that Elias's reform ideas would strengthen the empire's economic foundation. Governor Chen organized a coalition of planetary leaders who valued practical governance over grand gestures. Within 2 weeks, the political landscape had shifted dramatically. Where once Elias had been seen as a long shot, he was now viewed as the candidate who could unify the empire as effectively as his brother had unified the fleet. The military respected Darien's judgment. The economic leaders trusted his strategic thinking. And the common citizens remembered that it was Elias who had comforted the families of the fallen. "You've turned a military victory into a political revolution," Captain Reese observed as they reviewed intelligence reports showing Elias's growing support. "No," Darien corrected, watching through the viewport as repair crews worked on the captured enemy vessels. "I've turned a political necessity into a military opportunity." The victory was just the tool. The real goal was always the succession. When the formal succession hearing convened 3 weeks later, the outcome was no longer in doubt. Prince Victor still commanded significant military support, but key admirals and generals had quietly shifted to Elias. Princess Liana retained her intellectual supporters, but the industrial and scientific communities now favored the candidate who promised practical reforms over theoretical advances. Prince Alexei's youth movement had been overshadowed. The ghost of Kithara had fought his final battle, and he had won it not just with ships and weapons, but with something far more powerful: the gratitude of an empire that owed its survival to his strategic brilliance. As Prince Elias knelt before their father to receive the Crown Prince's seal, Darien felt the deep satisfaction of a campaign flawlessly executed. The ceremony was magnificent. Representatives from all 4 systems witnessed the formal investiture, and the new Crown Prince Elias received the ceremonial sword, the seal of succession, and the oaths of loyalty from the assembled nobility. But titles, Darien knew, were only as secure as the political will that supported them. The next 2 years tested that will repeatedly. Prince Victor, stung by his defeat but not deterred, launched a series of calculated challenges to Elias's position. He questioned the Crown Prince's military decisions, criticized his domestic policies, and subtly reminded key supporters that succession law allowed for the Crown Prince to be replaced if circumstances warranted. Princess Liana emerged from her scholarly pursuits to propose constitutional reforms that would strengthen the succession process, reforms that would coincidentally benefit her own potential claim. Even Prince Alexei, seemingly defeated, began building new coalitions among the younger noble houses, suggesting that perhaps the empire needed to reconsider its choice. Each challenge required Darien's careful intervention. When Victor questioned Elias's appointment of civilian administrators to traditionally military positions, Darien arranged for veteran officers to publicly praise the Crown Prince's wisdom in recognizing that peace required different skills than war. When Liana's constitutional proposals gained momentum among intellectual circles, Darien quietly reminded key supporters that constitutional experiments during uncertain times could destabilize the very institutions they sought to improve. When Alexei's youth movement resurged, Darien ensured that their rallies coincided with imperial announcements of economic prosperity and territorial stability under Elias's guidance. "They're like vultures," Captain Reese observed during one of their strategy sessions 18 months after Elias's investiture. "Every perceived weakness, every minor setback, they circle hoping for an opportunity." "Let them circle," Darian replied calmly. "Elias is proving himself every day. The economy is stable, the military is unified, and the people are content. Unlike my other brothers and sisters, whenever he does not know the answer, he is willing to listen to advice. The longer he serves as crown prince, the more obvious it becomes that he was the right choice." The vindication came during the Empire's most challenging crisis of those 2 years, a massive solar flare that damaged communication networks across the Silver Sun system. While other potential heirs debated the proper response in committee meetings, Crown Prince Elias immediately coordinated relief efforts, personally traveled to the affected worlds, and worked 18-hour days until every damaged facility was operational. His handling of the crisis demonstrated exactly the kind of competent, caring leadership that the Empire needed, and how the Crown Prince position had positively changed him, although he still required help from time to time from his brother and advisors. When Emperor Aldrich's health began failing in the 24th month of Elias's tenure as Crown Prince, there was no question about the succession. The challenges from Victor, Lyanna, and Alexei had only served to highlight Elias's strengths by contrast. The transition from Crown Prince to Emperor Elias III was swift, smooth, and universally accepted. Darian felt the deep satisfaction of a campaign flawlessly executed. His brother had not only gained the crown, but had proven worthy of it through 2 years of effective leadership. The Empire would remain stable, and he would finally be free to explore the stars beyond the 4 suns. But first, there was the delicate matter of securing that stability through the most dangerous political negotiation of all, arranging the new emperor's marriages to 4 women who had spent decades competing for power and would now have to decide whether a gentle idealist was worthy of their respect. Chapter 5. The Wives' Rivalry. The Imperial Marriage Pavilion had been prepared with meticulous care, its crystal walls reflecting the light of 4 ceremonial braziers representing each solar system. Emperor Elias III stood at the center, wearing the traditional white robes of matrimonial commitment, as 4 women approached from opposite directions, each representing not just a duchy, but a fundamental pillar of imperial power. Lady Sarah Voss entered from the Iron Sun's crimson archway, her military bearing unmistakable even in ceremonial dress. The daughter of Duke Voss's most trusted admiral, she had earned her own command during the recent border conflicts and possessed the kind of strategic mind that made seasoned generals defer to her judgment. Her marriage contract contained detailed provisions for military cooperation and defensive pacts, a reminder that the Iron Sun's loyalty came with explicit expectations. From the Silver Sun's Platinum Gateway came Lady Marina Astrid, whose merchant family's wealth rivaled that of entire planetary systems. Her economic acumen had turned struggling trade routes into prosperity corridors, and her network of financial contacts extended far beyond the Empire's borders. She moved with the confident precision of someone accustomed to negotiating deals worth more than most worlds' annual budgets, and her marriage brought access to credit systems that could fund or starve entire sectors. Lady Cassia Thorne arrived through the Crimson Sun's golden archway, carrying herself with the nurturing authority of someone who understood that empires were built on full bellies and fertile soil. Her innovations in agricultural technology had transformed barren worlds into garden planets, and her quiet influence among farming communities made her perhaps the most genuinely beloved figure among the common citizens. Her marriage contract focused on food security and terraforming rights, practical concerns that could determine the empire's long-term survival. Finally, through the traditional imperial gateway of polished obsidian, came Lady Vera Castellan, representing not a duchy but the empire's oldest noble traditions. Her family had served as imperial advisors for 12 generations, and her expertise in law and governance made her the natural choice to maintain constitutional continuity. She wore the simple but elegant robes that proclaimed ancient dignity over nouveau riche ostentation, and her presence reminded everyone that some bonds transcended mere political convenience. The ceremony itself was flawlessly executed, each vow carefully crafted to acknowledge both personal commitment and political necessity. But Elias could feel the tension beneath the pageantry. 4 brilliant women who had agreed to share a husband they barely knew, each calculating how to maximize their influence while minimizing their rivals' advantages. The true dynamics became apparent during the first week of married life, as the newly established imperial court settled into its complex routines. Each empress immediately claimed distinct territories within the palace complex, establishing separate households that functioned almost like embassies from their respective regions. Sarah converted the eastern wing into a command center that could have served as military headquarters. Her staff included intelligence analysts, strategic planners, and communication specialists who maintained constant contact with Iron Sun forces. She held daily briefings that resembled military councils more than domestic meetings, and her recommendations for imperial policy invariably emphasized security concerns and defensive preparations. Marina established her operations in the commercial district adjacent to the palace, where her offices hummed with financial activity around the clock. Traders, bankers, and industrial representatives streamed through her reception halls, turning her household into the empire's unofficial economic nerve center. Her policy recommendations focused on trade agreements, taxation structures, and infrastructure investments that would strengthen the empire's financial foundation. Cassia claimed the southern gardens and converted them into a working agricultural laboratory. Her staff included botanists, terraforming engineers, and representatives from farming communities across the empire. She hosted regular symposiums on crop yields, soil management, and planetary development gatherings that attracted the empire's most practical minds and generated innovations that directly improved citizens' lives. Vera occupied the traditional imperial quarters, surrounding herself with legal scholars, constitutional experts, and representatives from the empire's oldest noble families. Her influence operated through precedent and procedure, ensuring that innovations and changes occurred within established frameworks that maintained legitimacy and continuity. Within months, the 4 empresses had essentially created 4 separate governments operating within the imperial structure. Each pursued her own agenda, built her own networks, and competed for the emperor's attention and approval. Their rivalry was conducted with scrupulous politeness, but it was no less intense for being civilized. "Your Majesty," Sarah would say during their private dinners, "the intelligence reports from our border systems suggest we need enhanced defensive capabilities. Perhaps you could review the military budget allocations with me this evening." The next night, Marina would make her own subtle bid. "My economic advisors have identified several opportunities for improving imperial revenue streams. I've prepared some fascinating projections that might interest you." Cassia's approach was characteristically more personal. "The harvest reports from the outer agricultural worlds are quite promising. Would you like to review them while we walk in the gardens? The evening air is particularly pleasant this time of year." Vera's invitations carried the weight of tradition. "The constitutional scholars have raised some intriguing questions about recent policy implementations. Perhaps you'd join me in the library to discuss the historical precedents." Each invitation was perfectly reasonable, each request entirely legitimate. But Elias quickly realized that accepting one empress's counsel inevitably meant declining the others, and every decision created subtle shifts in the palace's delicate political balance. The competition extended beyond policy discussions into every aspect of imperial life. When Sarah arranged a military parade to celebrate the Empire's defensive capabilities, Marina countered with a trade exposition showcasing economic prosperity. When Cassia organized a harvest festival that celebrated agricultural abundance, Vera responded with a constitutional symposium that honored the Empire's legal traditions. Even their personal interactions with Elias became tools in their ongoing rivalry. Sarah's conversations focused on shared strategic challenges, positioning herself as his most trusted military advisor. Marina spoke of their partnership in building the Empire's economic future, emphasizing their intellectual compatibility. Cassia emphasized their mutual concern for the Empire's citizens, presenting herself as his most authentic emotional connection. Vera stressed their shared responsibility for maintaining imperial traditions, casting herself as his most reliable constitutional partner. "It's like being married to 4 separate empires," Elias confided to Darian during one of their private meetings. "Each wife is brilliant, capable, and completely committed to her vision of what the Empire should become. But their visions don't always align, and I'm caught in the middle of every disagreement." Darian, who had been observing the court dynamics with his usual tactical interest, offered a wry smile. "You wanted to be emperor, brother. This is what imperial power actually looks like. Not commanding from a throne, but navigating between competing interests, each of which has valid claims on your attention." "How did Father manage it?" Father had the advantage of establishing the relationships gradually over decades. He also ruled during a period of expansion, when there was enough growth to satisfy everyone's ambitions. Darian's expression grew more serious. "You're building something new, trying to maintain unity while allowing each faction to pursue their legitimate interests. It's more complex than conquest, and potentially more valuable." But as the first year of Elias's reign progressed, the strain began to show. The 4 empresses maintained their public politeness, but their private competition grew more intense. Staff members found themselves caught between conflicting directives. Policy initiatives stalled as different factions debated jurisdiction and priorities. Most concerning, the Empress's children born during the second year of the reign were already being positioned as potential heirs to their mother's specific agendas, rather than as princes and princesses of a unified empire. The crisis that would either destroy or transform the imperial marriage was building like a storm on the horizon, requiring only the right catalyst to unleash forces that could reshape the Four Sons Empire forever. Chapter 6. Crisis and Salvation. The catalyst came in the form of a diplomatic mission that should have been routine, a ceremonial flight to inaugurate the new prosperity trade route linking all 4 solar systems. The route represented everything Emperor Elias hoped to achieve: economic cooperation between the duchies, shared prosperity for all citizens, and a visible symbol of imperial unity. It seemed fitting that all 4 empresses should accompany him to the dedication ceremony. "The Imperial Transport Harmony has been specially configured for this mission," Captain Torres explained during the pre-flight briefing. "We'll make ceremonial stops at each system's primary trade hub, allowing local representatives to participate in the inauguration. Total journey time: 5 days." Lady Sarah reviewed the security protocols with her characteristic thoroughness. "Escort complement seems adequate. 2 heavy cruisers and a destroyer squadron. Flight path avoids known hazard zones." She paused, consulting her tactical display. "Though I'd prefer a larger escort, given the symbolic importance of this mission." "The reduced escort sends a message of confidence and peace," Lady Marina countered smoothly. "Excessive military presence might suggest we don't trust our own trade routes. That would undermine the very prosperity we're trying to promote." "Prosperity requires security to flourish," Lady Cassia added, though her tone suggested she was thinking of practical rather than military concerns. The agricultural transport ships need reliable protection if we're going to maintain food security across 4 systems. Lady Vera nodded thoughtfully. Constitutional precedent supports ceremonial flights with moderate escort. The legal framework for trade route dedication requires imperial presence, but it doesn't mandate fortress-level security. Emperor Elias listened to their discussions with the growing familiarity of someone who had spent 2 years navigating between 4 different perspectives on every decision. "We'll proceed as planned," he decided. "This mission represents unity and cooperation. We should demonstrate those qualities in our approach." The first 2 days of the journey proceeded flawlessly. At the Iron Sun's primary station, military officials praised the Emperor's commitment to securing trade routes. At the Silver Sun's commercial hub, business leaders celebrated the economic opportunities that the new route would create. The empresses maintained their public harmony while privately calculating the political benefits each ceremony provided to their respective agendas. It was during the approach to the Crimson Sun's agricultural center that the crisis began. "Imperial control to harmony," came the tense voice of Flight Controller Vex. "We're detecting anomalous readings from your primary drive system. Recommend immediate shutdown for diagnostic review." Captain Torres frowned at his engineering displays. "Engineering reports all systems nominal. Request clarification on the nature of these anomalous readings." "Sir," interrupted Chief Engineer Park from the ship's lower levels, her voice tight with concern, "I'm showing cascade failures in the containment matrix. This isn't a false alarm. We have a real problem developing." What followed was 18 minutes of controlled chaos as the ship's crew fought to contain a catastrophic failure in the primary fusion drive. The Harmony shuddered as containment fields fluctuated, emergency power systems activated throughout the vessel, and evacuation alerts echoed through the corridors. "All passengers to emergency stations," Captain Torres announced with grim professionalism. "We are experiencing critical system failures. Prepare for possible evacuation." In the Imperial quarters, the 4 empresses responded to the crisis with the competence that had made them formidable political figures. But for the first time since their marriages, they found themselves working together rather than in competition. "Life pod assignments," Lady Sarah said crisply, falling back on her military training. "Vera, you coordinate with the ship's officers to ensure proper evacuation procedures. Marina, calculate our position relative to nearby rescue assets, who can reach us fastest and with what capacity. Cassia," she continued without pause, "the ship's crew will be focused on technical solutions. Someone needs to coordinate passenger welfare and medical support. That's your area." For a moment, the Crimson Sun Empress looked surprised at being given orders by her Iron Sun rival. Then professional competence overrode personal politics. "Understood. I'll establish triage protocols and coordinate with the medical bay." "What about communications?" Lady Vera asked, her scholarly demeanor replaced by sharp focus. "We need to ensure proper succession protocols are observed if—" She didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood the implications. "I'm already drafting emergency succession documents," Marina replied, her financial precision proving unexpectedly useful for legal procedures. "We need clear chains of command established before this situation deteriorates further." The next hour tested every skill the 4 women possessed. As the Harmony continued to lose power and structural integrity, they transformed from rivals into a functioning command team. Sarah coordinated with the ship's security forces to maintain order and prepare for evacuation. Marina established communication with nearby vessels and calculated optimal rescue strategies. Cassia organized passenger support and medical care. Vera ensured that all emergency procedures followed proper imperial protocols. But it was Emperor Elias who surprised them all. When Captain Torres announced that the main hull was beginning to buckle and immediate evacuation was necessary, Elias refused to abandon ship, until every crew member and passenger had been safely transferred to the rescue vessels. "Your Majesty," Lady Sarah said firmly, "Imperial protocol requires your immediate evacuation. The succession is secure," Elias replied calmly, helping an injured engineer toward the evacuation bay. "Darian's children can inherit if necessary. Right now, my duty is to these people." "Sir," Captain Torres added urgently, "the containment field could collapse completely at any moment. If you're still aboard when that happens, then I'll face the same risk as everyone else who's still aboard." Elias's voice carried a quiet authority that none of them had heard before. "That's what leadership means." For the next 20 minutes, the four empresses watched their supposedly gentle, idealistic husband display a form of courage that put their political maneuvering into sharp perspective. He carried unconscious crew members through collapsing corridors. He coordinated rescue efforts with the calm competence of a seasoned emergency commander. He was the last person to leave the Harmony before its final structural collapse, and he personally ensured that the rescue count matched the ship's manifest. In the aftermath, as they floated in the rescue ship's medical bay receiving treatment for minor injuries and shock, the four empresses found themselves looking at their husband and each other with entirely new eyes. "I've been wrong about you," Lady Sarah said quietly to Elias as medical technicians checked his vital signs. "I thought your gentleness was weakness, but what you did back there, that took more courage than any military action I've commanded." Lady Marina nodded slowly. "In my world, we measure people by their profit margins and risk calculations. I calculated that you were too idealistic to be an effective emperor. I was wrong about what effectiveness actually means. You risked everything for people who couldn't give you anything in return," Lady Cassia added, her voice filled with something that might have been wonder. "That's not political strategy, that's genuine leadership." Lady Vera's scholarly precision had been replaced by simple honesty. "I've spent so much time analyzing constitutional precedents that I forgot why those precedents matter. You showed us today what imperial duty actually looks like." Emperor Elias, exhausted and still shaken by the near disaster, looked at the four brilliant women who had agreed to share his life and his burden. For the first time since their marriages, he saw not competitors or political assets, but partners who had proven themselves when everything was at stake. "I should be thanking you," he said simply. "When the crisis hit, you didn't think about your individual agendas or your competition with each other. You worked together to save lives. That's not just impressive. It's exactly what the Empire needs from its leadership." In that medical bay, floating in the darkness between the stars, 5 people who had been bound by political necessity began to discover something more valuable than ambition or strategy, the foundation of genuine partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. The near disaster that had threatened to destroy them had instead revealed what they could become when they stopped competing and started cooperating. But the real test would come when they returned to the palace, where the pressures of imperial politics would challenge this newfound unity with every decision, every crisis, and every choice between personal advantage and common good. Chapter 7. The New Understanding. The first sign that something fundamental had changed came during the emergency council session called to address the Harmony incident. Instead of sitting in their traditional positions, each empress flanked by her own advisors in separate sections of the council chamber. The 4 women took seats around a single table with Emperor Elias at its head. The official investigation concluded that the drive failure was caused by a manufacturing defect in the containment matrix, Lady Vera reported, her legal training evident in the precise summary. No evidence of sabotage or external interference. The shipyard has implemented new quality control measures. More importantly, Lady Sarah added, our response protocols proved inadequate. We need better coordination between civilian and military rescue assets. She paused, glancing at her fellow empresses before continuing. I'm proposing a joint emergency response system that draws resources from all 4 duchies. Lady Marina nodded approvingly. The economic analysis supports unified emergency services. Separate systems create redundancies that waste resources while leaving gaps in coverage. A coordinated approach would be more efficient and more effective. And more humane, Lady Cassia contributed. During the evacuation, we had medical supplies from the Iron Sun, transport capacity from the Silver Sun, and emergency rations from the Crimson Sun. But coordination was improvised. We can do better. Emperor Elias listened to their discussion with growing amazement. 3 weeks earlier, such cooperation would have been impossible. Each empress would have insisted that her duchy's approach was superior. Each would have maneuvered for advantage in any joint system. Now they were building consensus as naturally as they had once built barriers. "There's something else," Lady Marina said, her tone becoming more personal. "We've been discussing the competitive nature of our relationships, both political and personal." The chamber fell silent. This was dangerous territory, the kind of conversation that could either solidify or prevail their new partnership or expose fatal contradictions. Lady Sarah took the lead, her military directness serving them well. "We were treating marriage to the Emperor like a zero-sum competition. Every advantage one of us gained meant losses for the others. Every moment of his attention was something to be won or defended. It was exhausting," Lady Cassia admitted quietly, "and ultimately counterproductive. We spent more energy competing with each other than we did serving the Empire. The constitutional precedents actually support cooperative governance," Lady Vera observed, falling back on her scholarly expertise. "Historical analysis shows that the most stable reigns featured collaborative rather than competitive imperial courts." "What are you proposing?" Emperor Elias asked carefully. Lady Marina's merchant instincts had identified the core issue. "A formal power-sharing agreement. Instead of 4 empresses competing for undefined influence, we become 4 partners with clearly defined responsibilities and mutual support obligations." Over the next hour, they outlined a revolutionary approach to imperial governance. Lady Sarah would oversee all military and security matters, with the understanding that defensive strategies required input from economic, agricultural, and legal perspectives. Lady Marina would manage imperial finances and trade policy, but within frameworks that considered military security, food security, and constitutional constraints. Lady Cassia would coordinate agricultural and domestic policy, ensuring that citizen welfare remained central to all imperial decisions. Lady Vera would serve as constitutional advisor and legal coordinator, maintaining the rule of law while enabling necessary reforms. "But what about personal relationships?" Emperor Elias asked. "You're talking about professional partnerships, but we're also married. We also have children to consider." The question hung in the air like a challenge to their newfound cooperation. This was the territory where competition had been most intense and most personal. Lady Sarah surprised everyone by laughing, a sound that had rarely been heard in the formal atmosphere of the imperial court. "Honestly, I never expected to fall madly in love with you, Your Majesty. The marriage was political, and I approached it as such. But after the harmony," Lady Marina continued, "I realized that respect and affection can grow from shared experiences and mutual admiration. We don't have to choose between political partnership and personal care." "I've grown fond of you," Lady Cassia said simply to Elias. "Not the passionate romance that poets write about, but genuine fondness based on knowing your character. And I've developed real respect for these remarkable women who share our unusual household." Lady Vera nodded thoughtfully. "The legal precedents for plural marriage emphasize complementary relationships rather than competitive ones. We can be partners in governance and partners in family life without requiring exclusive romantic attachment." "What about our children?" Emperor Elias pressed. They are already being seen as potential heirs to your individual agendas, rather than as princes and princesses of a unified empire. That changes now, Lady Sarah said firmly. Prince Marcus, she gestured toward her 2-year-old son, will be raised as an imperial prince first and an Iron Son heir second. His education will include military training, but also economics, agriculture, and constitutional law. Princess Arya will learn trade and finance, Lady Marina agreed, but also military strategy, agricultural management, and legal principles. No more raising specialized heir for factional interest. The conversation continued late into the evening, but by its conclusion, they had established something unprecedented in imperial history. A formal compact of cooperative governance that transformed political necessity into genuine partnership. The changes became visible almost immediately. Imperial policy discussions now featured 4 perspectives working toward synthesis rather than 4 advocates competing for dominance. The Empress's separate household staffs were integrated into specialized departments that served imperial rather than factional interests. Most significantly, their children began growing up as siblings rather than rivals, playing together in gardens that had once been carefully divided territorial boundaries. It's remarkable, Prince Darian observed during one of his periodic visits to the capital. You've created something that Father never achieved, an imperial court that actually functions as a unit rather than as a collection of competing interests. We had help, Emperor Elias replied, watching through the palace windows as his children played together while their mothers discussed agricultural policy with visiting planetary governors. Crisis has a way of revealing what's actually important. And what did you discover was actually important? That competent people working together can accomplish far more than brilliant people working at cross purposes, Elias said simply. That respect grows more naturally than love, but it's often more valuable. And that the empire is stronger when its leaders complement each other's strengths rather than compensating for each other's weaknesses. The transformation wasn't complete. Old habits of competition occasionally surfaced, and new challenges would test their unity. But the foundation had been established. 4 remarkable women and 1 principled man who had learned to build partnership from political necessity, and who had discovered that such partnerships could evolve into something approaching contentment. Not the passionate romance of legends, but something more durable. A working relationship based on mutual respect, shared responsibility, and genuine care for both each other and the empire they served together. In a political universe where marriages were weapons and love was luxury, they had created something both practical and precious. A family that was also a government, and a government that had learned to function as a family. Chapter 8. The Golden Balance. 10 years after the Harmony incident, the Four Sons Empire had become something unprecedented in galactic history. A realm that prospered, not despite its political complexities, but because of how skillfully those complexities were managed. The imperial throne room, once dominated by competing displays of factional power, now featured integrated presentations that showcased cooperative achievements. Trade route maps highlighted how Iron Sun security enabled Silver Sun commerce, which supported Crimson Sun agricultural expansion, all within constitutional frameworks developed by the traditional imperial bureaucracy. The 4 braziers still burned at the cardinal points, but they now represented collaborative pillars rather than competing territories. The harvest projections for the Outer Rim colonies exceed expectations by 30%, Lady Cassia reported during the weekly Imperial Council meeting. At 45, she had grown into her role as the Empire's domestic coordinator with quiet confidence, her expertise in agricultural development having evolved into broader competence in citizen welfare, which creates interesting opportunities for expanded trade relationships, Lady Marina added seamlessly. Now in her early 40s, her merchant background had expanded into comprehensive economic planning, that balanced profit with stability. The Confederation of Outer Worlds has expressed interest in long-term food security contracts. Any security implications? Emperor Elias asked, turning to Lady Sarah with the natural consultation that had replaced his early uncertainty about managing multiple perspectives. Nothing significant, Lady Sarah replied, her military bearing softened by a decade of collaborative leadership. The Confederation has maintained peaceful relations since the border agreements were established. Standard precautions should suffice. She paused, consulting her notes. Though we should coordinate with Vera on the legal frameworks for long-term interstellar contracts. Lady Vera nodded approvingly. I've been reviewing the constitutional precedents for such agreements. We have flexibility within existing law, but I'd recommend formal Senate ratification to ensure legitimacy. The conversation flowed with the practiced ease of people who had learned to turn their different expertise into collective wisdom. No competition, no maneuvering for advantage, just 4 competent administrators working toward shared goals under the guidance of an emperor who had grown into his role through genuine care for his responsibilities. The transformation was most visible in their children, now ranging in age from 8 to 12. Prince Marcus, Lady Sarah's son, displayed his mother's strategic thinking, but tempered with his father's empathy. Princess Arya, Lady Marina's daughter, showed remarkable aptitude for both economics and diplomacy. Prince David, Lady Cassia's boy, had inherited his mother's connection to the common people, along with an intuitive understanding of agricultural science. Princess Elena, Lady Vera's daughter and the youngest, demonstrated the scholarly precision of her mother combined with an unexpected gift for creative problem-solving. They're growing up as true imperial heirs, Lady Vera observed, as they watched the children collaborate on a school project about interstellar governance. No factional loyalties, no competitive dynamics, just siblings working together toward common understanding. Sometimes I wonder if we've made it too easy for them, Lady Sarah mused. They've never experienced the kind of political competition that shaped us. Perhaps that's exactly what the Empire needs, Emperor Elias suggested. A generation that assumes cooperation rather than learning it through conflict. The proof of their success extended far beyond the palace walls. Economic prosperity had reached levels not seen since the Empire's founding, built on trade relationships that were secure because they were mutually beneficial. Agricultural development had eliminated food insecurity throughout imperial space, while creating surplus that strengthened diplomatic relationships with neighboring powers. Military forces remained strong, but were primarily used for exploration and humanitarian missions, rather than territorial expansion or internal enforcement. Most significantly, the Empire's citizens had developed genuine loyalty to imperial institutions. Where previous generations had identified primarily with their home duchies, the current population thought of themselves as citizens of the Four Sons Empire first and duchy residents second. This shift in identity had created political stability that previous emperors could only dream of achieving. "Your father would be amazed," Prince Darian observed during one of his increasingly frequent visits. The ghost of Kithara had spent the decade exploring the galaxy's rim, but he always returned for important family celebrations and imperial milestones. He managed the Empire's contradictions through careful balance and constant vigilance. You've eliminated many of the contradictions entirely. "We've been fortunate," Emperor Elias replied, though his tone suggested he understood that luck had been only a small factor in their success. "Fortunate in crisis, perhaps, but wise in response," Darian corrected. "The Harmony incident could have destroyed your reign. Instead, you used it to build something stronger than what existed before." The conversation took place in the Imperial Gardens, where the 4 empresses sat together reading while their children played nearby. The scene would have been impossible during the early years of Elias's reign, when even family gatherings were constrained by political calculations and competitive dynamics. "Do you ever regret it?" Lady Marina asked suddenly, looking up from her economic reports. The choice to share power rather than compete for it? Regret, cooperative success. Lady Sarah laughed. I've accomplished more in the last decade than I could have achieved in a lifetime of political maneuvering. And I've done it while maintaining genuine friendships with remarkable women. The children certainly haven't suffered from having 4 mothers instead of 1, Lady Cassia added, watching as Princess Elena helped Prince David with his botanical calculations. They've learned different skills from each of us while growing up in a household that values collaboration over competition. Constitutional precedent suggests that the most stable governments feature distributed rather than concentrated power, Lady Vera noted with scholarly precision. We've created a practical demonstration of that principle. And personally, Emperor Elias asked, are you content with what we've built together? The question hung in the air for a moment. Not because it was difficult, but because the answer was complex in ways that traditional marriage wouldn't have been. Content? Lady Sarah said finally. Not the passionate attachment, but something more sustainable. Affection based on genuine respect. Partnership based on complementary strengths. Family bonds built through shared experience and mutual care. I care for you, Lady Marina added to Elias, and for our unusual family. Not the exclusive devotion that some marriages require, but inclusive care that embraces everyone who shares our responsibilities and our household. We've learned to love appropriately, Lady Cassia said thoughtfully. You're not the great passion of my life, but you're someone I trust completely and care for deeply. That seems more valuable than passion would be. And more durable, Lady Vera concluded. Passionate love burns bright, but often burns out. Affection built on respect and shared purpose can last for decades. We're proof of that. As the sun set over Aurelius Prime, casting long shadows through the garden where 5 adults and 4 children represented the future of an empire, Emperor Elias reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them to this point. He had never sought power, but had accepted it as duty. He had never expected to find contentment in political marriage, but had discovered that partnership could evolve into genuine care. The 4 Sons Empire had found its golden balance, not through the dominance of any single vision, but through the synthesis of multiple perspectives into something stronger than any individual approach could achieve. It wasn't the empire that Crown Prince Marcus would have built through fear, or that Prince Victor would have forged through military strength, or that Princess Leanna would have constructed through intellectual innovation. It was something entirely new. An empire built on the revolutionary premise that competent people working together could create prosperity, stability, and genuine contentment for themselves and for the billions of citizens who depended on their wisdom. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, 4 women who had learned to share power and 1 man who had learned to wield it gently continued their quiet work of governing an empire that had discovered the secret of turning political necessity into lasting partnership, and partnership into something approaching happiness. The 4 Sons Empire would endure not because it was perfect, but because it was adaptable, cooperative, and guided by people who had learned that the greatest strength came not from dominion, but from unity built on mutual respect and shared purpose.